Hey, good people. Grits or cream of wheat? Who the hell is racist? Does anyone ever ask if they touch your hair?
Black Like Me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Black Like Me.
Hey, Black Like Me podcast listeners, I hope that you're doing well, that you're staying safe, and that you're holding it together in such crazy times. This is a brand new episode. I had a chance to interview Mr. McCarty, who was he's brilliant, he's a griot, he's a storyteller, and as a storyteller, I was just intrigued. My only disappointment with this episode is that I didn't have more time to talk to this man for hours. He is a number of things. He's an artist, he's an author, he's a public speaker, he's a thinker, he's a thought leader, he's a former Black Panther, and he gives insights to the work of the Black Panther movement that wasn't made public, not readily. And so when many of you who are non-Black hear Black Panther, kill Whitey. No, that's not what Black Panthers were about. So again, because you're part of Black Like Me, you get an inside track from a gentleman who was a part of this organization in its early days. So I want you to listen to this. I want you to take it in. And I want you to realize or ask yourselves questions that Black folks do all the time. How much have we changed since the late 50s and the early 60s? We talk about it in a community like Madison, Wisconsin. We talk about being progressives. But how much have we really changed on a psychic level, on a policy level, on an attitudinal level? And this helps us to grasp just how much work we need to do. So a couple things I want to share with you. I ask our listeners to listen deeply, to lean in, posture yourself to take the information in, learn to be transformed by it, and then lead others to the light. Another thing I want you to do is to please subscribe to the podcast. That just helps us tremendously. And lastly, click the Patreon link. And I say this because many of our new listeners, you are the ones who click the link the fastest, and I so appreciate you. And people think, it doesn't make a lot of difference. My $2, my $6. Actually, it really does. I've been known to say that white allies or non-Black allies, they educate themselves, they donate, and then they affiliate. They come into the knowledge of what's going on in an area of interest. They donate to that cause, and it helps to make sure that it's a Black-led cause, that it's Black organizations you support if it's a Black cause. And then thirdly, affiliate. Join the mailing list, subscribe, tell others about it, share the information, bring others into the knowledge, because that helps us to really get our message out. This is not about entertainment. It's about reaching people who are leaning in, trying to develop a deeper understanding of how we got to where we are as a nation, a people, a country, and where do we go from here. I want to help lead that discussion. I want to help create some new ways of thinking about it. And I want to mobilize non-Black people into that space to help it happen, because Black people cannot and should not do it alone, because we did not create it. So please click that Patreon link. Don't tell yourself that it doesn't matter. It does. Here's an opportunity to donate and to support something that's meaningful to you. Enjoy this episode and please share it broadly. And so today, my very special guest is a latter-day griot, and his name is Michael McCarty. And listen, I am connected with him through his nephew. We work together, we're colleagues. He works for me. He's a part of our church, but he's always spoken so highly of this gentleman and his work and his influence in his life. And in my social media descriptions, particularly the one in Instagram, I mentioned that I'm a griot, but I've never met someone who's my age or older who identifies or introduces himself as a latter-day griot. And so we're going to have some interesting conversations about history, about his experience in the Black Panthers, about his just take on the world. I appreciate the opportunity of sitting down with one of my elders, with a colleague, and just talking about life through their eyes. And so he hails from Inglewood, California, but home is Chicago, Illinois. Mr. McCarty, welcome to Black Like Me.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here. So listen, sir, before we get into the serious business of your life, I always open up with something that's called Black Icebreakers. And because I know you're my age or maybe a few years older, and because I know you're from Chicago, we're going to have fun with some of these because some of these don't work with younger people. Mm-hmm. And so let me just ask you a couple of questions, sir. Sure. Growing up, grits or cream of wheat?
Grits.
Come on, I knew we were going to be fast friends. So, Mr. McCarty, did you put butter and sugar on them or butter and salt?
Butter and salt.
Butter and
Not
salt.
Butter.
Butter. And salt. Oh, my goodness. All right, so when you were growing up, sir, did you have, in your home or did you have relatives who had plastic on furniture?
Oh, like please. On furniture, on the carpet. In fact, my mother had runners that went over the plastic on the carpet.
I forgot about those plastic runners. Was that the thick plastic that sort of had those little prongs in them? That stuff hurt if it rolled back and you stepped on it?
Yep.
Oh, my goodness. And was that furniture in something that Black folks used to call the front room? A room that you weren't even supposed to go in. It's like a museum. Like
you had to levitate on it. You couldn't even. In fact, you had plastic on, and then they put cloth, covers over the plastic.
Come on now. That's what I'm talking about. When I ask this of younger people, they don't know what I'm talking about. My goodness. When you now. I was raised by my mom, but my grandmother had a large influence in my life. And so she would not refer to the sink in the bathroom as a sink, but the face bowl. When you're growing up, the people call the sink the face bowl.
You know something? That's the first time I've heard that, but I remember that. I remember that, the face bowl.
Yeah, because sometimes, they would have the old face bowls that you would carry with water in it, but she would always call the sink the face bowl. Now, you were probably a good kid, so you probably didn't get spankings. But if you did, on the occasion that you did, sir, did you ever get syllable spankings? And by syllable spankings, that's when Black parents would whoop us and say, and they would give you a lecture in syllables like, didn't I tell you?
And every stroke was a stroke with every syllable.
Didn't I? Did you have to be in or on your front porch before the street lights came on or before the sun hit the trees?
Oh, yes. We had designated porches that it was all right to be at a certain time of night. There was the Hudson's porch next door, or it was the Logan's porch across the street, and those were safe areas until a certain time.
Oh my goodness. Now listen, Mr. McCarty, I'm having fun with you because sometimes people don't know what I'm talking about. So I just got to hit a whole bunch of these because I don't typically get a chance to do this. Can you name any of the children or characters on Good Times?
Now I predate Good Times. I'm way.
Oh, that's okay. I got you. Okay, I got you.
When Good Times came out, part of Good Times. In fact, I was in the Army, stationed in Korea.
So you were grown.
Yeah.
So I can't ask you about Good Times, and I can't. So then, well, let me see if I can slide this in on you. But this might predate you. I mean, you might predate this too because you're in the service. I lived in Madison. But we got Channel 9 WGN. So I used to watch Ray Rayner before school. Does that ring any bell? Ray Rayner on Channel 9?
Yes, it does.
And Cuddly Dudley and Garfield Goose.
Ray Rayner, I remember.
Okay, yeah, but it was a big Channel 9 kind of thing that kids would watch before they go to school. Hey, do you remember? Let me just see if this was true in your family. If you were eating catfish and got a bone stuck in your throat, do you remember what the old folks would give you to get the bone out your throat?
Bread.
Yeah, exactly. White bread, that white gummy bread.
Yep.
It's funny when my white listeners hear these questions, they try to put their minds together. They're like, okay, y'all never met. How do you know the same questions to things like, same answers to things like a fish bone in your throat? Hey, did you have play cousins growing up that you didn't know were not your real cousins until maybe you were an adult or went to a funeral or something?
I had more than play cousins. I had play brothers and sisters.
Really?
Because I'm the baby in my family. It was 14, 20, 25 years between me and my siblings.
Oh, wow.
All right. 14, 20, and 25 years. And we didn't have a lot of relatives in the area. because my mother was from Barbados, my father was from Mississippi. So, but the neighbors next door, the Hudsons especially, they were my first friends. Janice and Herb, they were my first friends. And my brother passed away last month, and the Hudsons came, and they all refer to me as Big Brother.
Oh my goodness, I love that. I love that. Did you live near your grandparents? Did you see your grandparents?
Okay.
Yes.
My father was born in 1900.
What?
Okay. And my mother in 1908.
Wow.
I was a surprise.
I got, you know what? Moving right along. Yes, sir. I know. I love that. Let me just see if there's anything else in here that is that's fun. Let me just see. Man, you said that about, hey, when you're growing up, did your folks put bleach in dishwater when they were doing dishes?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Definitely.
Listen, decades before COVID-19, Black folks had interesting usages for Clorox bleach. Listen, Black people could take Clorox bleach. We could take Vaseline and white bread. And we could
save the world.
It saved the world. We could sop that bread up with some gravy or get a fish bone out your throat. And with Vaseline, we could do your hair or fix your cuts. Oh, my goodness. Mr. McCarty, man, thanks for letting me do that. That's always fun.
Yeah.
To talk to people about just some of those cultural norms. Because one of the things I learned is that we as Black people are not a defeated folk and the defeated group, because defeated people don't create culture. And the fact that you and I have never met in person, we've had only just one brief conversation, but we can laugh around bread and fishbone in your throat or Clorox in a dishwasher, shows that somehow Black people have these similar experiences. That's powerful. And when my non-Black listeners hear us laugh about some of these things, they just ask themselves, how could they know this? And I just think it speaks to the strength and the beauty of our culture.
Sure enough.
Man, for so many folks, they don't even know what a griot is, and it's spelled G-R-I-O-T. A lot of people pronounce the T. My sister always rebukes me and says, that T is silent. But just briefly, tell folks that are listening who a griot is and what a griot does.
Okay, and how it's pronounced, with or without the T, it's all good.
It's all good.
A griot is a historian. Traditionally, in Africa, there was a griot family. At the age of about 8 years old, the children in that griot family started attending community events, and they started then learning the history of the community in general, but then the specific histories of the families in that community. Wow. Each griot family had a group of families, or maybe it was the whole village. And so they started learning that history. Now check this out.
Sure.
During wartime between different tribes, the griots would be there to record the events.
What?
The griots wore certain outfits to designate them from everybody else, to delineate them from everybody else.
Sure.
They were not to be harmed because they were there to record all that happened.
That's amazing.
And so, when Alex Haley was doing Roots, he had one name, I think the African name that he knew. I think it was the African name for the character Chicken George. Mm-hmm. When he went back to West Africa and he found this village, he was able to trace his ancestry to this particular village, and that village griot was able to give him history on his family.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So at what age did you know that you wanted to be a griot, and at what age did you know you were one?
Well, I didn't even know that's what I was doing. My mother always read me and told me stories about, not only stories from culture and history, but stories about growing up in Barbados and what have you. And she encouraged me to read. And then in the 60s, when I was in high school, I started studying Black history before the Mayflower, Lerone Bennett,
right,
and all these other things. I started finding out all this stuff, and I shared what I found with my classmates and with my friends via story. And then in 1992, I was introduced to a gentleman out here in the LA area named Joel Benizzi. And he was introduced to me as a professional storyteller. I said,
Wow.
You do what?
That's a
People
thing?
pay you to tell stories? How you do that? And so I picked his brain, and while talking with him, it came to me. I said, I'm going to do this, and my motto was going to be, have mouth, we'll run it. And I've been telling stories around the country and around the world ever since.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, did I understand this correctly? You were part of a civil rights history project that was sponsored by the Smithsonian National Museum for African American Studies and Culture, that you were interviewed for something back in 2016?
Actually, I was interviewed for a documentary
on
the Black Panther Party called the Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution.
That's what you were regarded for on that.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to get back to that Black Panther stuff because that's intriguing me. I have so many questions for you around that. So you're from Chicago. You're born on the South Side, but moved to the West Side?
Correct. Born in Ida B. Wells. We moved to the West Side over Lawndale area when I was about 3 years old, 1953.
Mike, I was born in the Douglas Park area. My folks lived, in Douglas Park, and before we moved to Madison, I lived at Hamlin and Wilcox, so right across from the shelter in Garfield Park.
Yeah.
So that big park right there, shelter.
Well.
I went to Head Start, kindergarten, and first grade at Delano. So that's right on Springfield and Wilcox, like between Springfield and Pulaski, not far from Goldblatt's and Pulaski and Madison.
Pulaski and Madison, or Madison Street. That was Madison Street.
There was a library right there, Chicago Library, that got my first library card from. My mom used to shop at Goldblatt's.
Oh yeah.
And there was three sisters and stuff. We lived across from Garfield Park when Dr. King was assassinated. So we were literally across the street from that park. I could see the flames from Madison Street. Mm-hmm. I could see Madison Street in my head. I can still see it burning down. That was one of the things that made Mom want to get out of Madison. Get out of Chicago.
When King came to Chicago around 1967, 68.
Mm-hmm. For the Poor People's Campaign?
Yeah. He stayed around the corner, down the street around the corner from where I grew up.
Sure, because he was on 16th Street,
Douglas
right?
Park. But actually, he was in Douglas Park on this little street across from the statue in that statue in the park. Sure. Yeah, he lived across from there.
Oh my goodness!
He stayed across from there.
Yeah, my folks lived in Douglas Park area right when I was born, and then a little bit later we moved further north towards Garfield Park. Man, okay, great. So fellow
homeboy.
West yeah, that's right, man. Come on now, that's right. That's right. So man, so I love the fact that you became interested in storytelling, because I'm sure you saw this innate power and a sense of strength and community building in knowing our history and knowing our stories. So even in wartime, you said griots were protected because of their value that they brought to the community. Other than just slave trading, what caused us to really lose the position of griot? Or diminish its role in our community? Any insight into what happened that we stopped having those folks, or have we had them, but they've just been more low key? It was an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent who would tell you the stories.
That's exactly what happened, because what with the slave trade, communities' lives were totally disrupted.
Right.
All right. Total. People split up, and then once people were brought to the various slave regions, Blacks were not allowed to speak their language, maintain their names. I mean, you could be virtually killed for talking in your language, for discussing your history.
Wow.
It was that severe. It was that severe. But what happened is that, because it's in the nature of the community, stories, invariably there was somebody, might have been a grandfather, uncle, an aunt, a grandmother, someone who told you stories. It's like with my mom, telling me stories about growing up in Barbados. It's about telling about these cousins here, sharing the history. It sort of became innate, and within families, someone designated that role. I have a friend out here, Barbara Clark. She grew up on the East Coast, and her grandmother told her, and of all her family, she's the only one in the family, her grandmother was part of the first Juneteenth. Okay?
The first
Juneteenth, when the after the Civil War, in Texas especially,
right.
Blacks were not informed that they were free.
That's exactly right.
And so one day, the soldiers showed up on these plantations and called all of the so-called slaves in from the house, in from the field, and informed them, you are and have been free. And you don't have to stay with these people. If you want to leave, you can leave with us. If you stay with these people, they got to pay you for your work. That's
wow.
how Juneteenth
that's how it started.
Be.
You're right.
Yeah, that's how Juneteenth came to be. And we have these stories. I had another neighbor whose her family was part of a Juneteenth. And so those stories spread and were shared.
And so we've had these informal griots in our community who have told stories. In some regard, have Black faith leaders or Black pastors considered part of the
definitely
griot tradition?
Definitely. Anybody, anyone, any group of folks who share stories, have that tradition, sit down with children, and as they grow up, they share these stories, they tell them about these things that happen in the family, and encourage them to share it then with their children.
Wow. You know, I feel that in some ways on a purely academic level, I had a good education growing up in Madison, Wisconsin, but culturally, it left so much to be desired. In fact, I was an econ major in college at the University of Wisconsin, and I decided to take a few of my breadth and depth courses through the African American History department. I had never heard of the Harlem Renaissance in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took so many classes. I found a way to take econ courses that were cross-listed, like Black economics. I found a way to take the medical and biological aspects of race. I took biology, English, sociology, so many requirements in the Black Studies department that cross-listed with my major, to the point that my advisor said I had enough credits to declare a major in African American history. I felt like I was thirsty and drinking at a fountain, that I was an adult male and did not know the name Ida B. Wells. I didn't know these kinds of things. And so I'm trying to make up for it now, but I felt so deprived that I didn't know the things that would give me greater confidence in who I was and what my people had accomplished. And I know that that's strategically done. It's not as if Black people just said, hey, we don't want to talk about that. But tell me a little bit about what you think the strategic move has been to further disenfranchise Black folks by just making sure that the beauty and strength of our history is not told to all students and not just Black students.
And if you want to blind the people, you want to limit the people, you restrict their access to their stories, their history, and their culture. I want to drop a name,
please,
on you and for your audience, because this is a mission of mine to let people know about this man. Paul Robeson, 2 syllables, Robeson. Paul Robeson. Most people haven't heard of Paul Robeson. Yet in his day, Paul Robeson was one of the most famous entertainers in the world.
Yes.
All right, in the world. India had a Paul Robeson Day in the late 40s, early 50s.
In India?
Yes, in India. He spoke and sang in over 20 languages. All right, over 20 languages. Let me give you, this is one of the stories I like to share about Robeson. Before World War II, there was a civil war in Spain. Franco was the fascist dictator, and there was a group of Americans called the Lincoln Brigade who had gone to Spain to fight against Franco and the fascists, to join the Spanish troops. Paul Robeson was a supporter of liberty and freedom. So he went to Spain, and his plan was to go and sing for the Lincoln Brigade.
Sure.
But when he arrived, they were in the midst of a battle. All right, there was bullets flying, bombs blasting. When the other side heard that Paul Robeson was there,
They stopped
Time out.
of the war.
They stopped a battle in the midst of a war so they could all sit and listen to Paul Robeson sing.
Because he had this beautiful baritone voice.
Yes. And he had made a whole program of what were called Negro spirituals.
Right.
That he took all over the world. And it's a fascinating story. I would love to go into it, but we got so much to go. But if you don't know about Paul Robeson, check him out. There's
you
a
need
lot
to know. Wow, that is amazing. I knew he traveled the world, but I didn't know that the opposing side stopped and said, "What? Paul Robeson's here? Let's go listen to him."
Yeah.
And we didn't have internet or social media. The fact that they knew him because of his, being on the airwaves or the vinyl, that carried his voice, that is absolutely amazing. And so as you look, as an elder in our community, as you look at the plight of many of our African Americans, I'm sure that there are days, sir, you must look and think, if only they knew from whom they came, if only they knew that their history, that they might be outnumbered now, but that's not new. If only they understood their foundation, they would navigate the world differently if they understood that their people had a hand in shaping this world.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. When I was in high school, I went to a St. Ignatius High School in Chicago. And my freshman year was 1965. And so there was I think it was Ellis Books was over on the south side of Chicago. And that's, like I said, before the Mayflower, John Hope Franklin, I started reading all this stuff. And it was amazing to me. It was amazing to me to find out all this history that was hidden from us. And once I started sharing it with people, they could then share it, and it would go on and on and on and on and on. There's so much. There are so many stories. I mean, if I could show you, I have a office full of books, and I look for things. Eugene Jock Bullard, first African-American military pilot who flew for France in World War I, when blacks were not barely allowed to be in the military, but definitely weren't allowed to fly planes. And
he flew transatlantic.
He flew in France. His father had told him, it's a long story, but his father had told his kids, you got to go to France. And I think 11 years old, he decided to go to France. And he eventually went there and joined the World War I, and eventually became a pilot, became a nightclub owner, and it's just an amazing story.
Right.
The game evolved again in World War II. Contemporary of Josephine Baker.
Wow.
It's just Eugene Jock Bullard. Again, look him up.
We're going to put these names actually in the podcast, sir, so that like you drop Paul Robeson and Eugene Jock Bullard, you said?
Yep.
We're going to get those names. We're going to put a link in so people can read more about them, and also links about your website and things that you're doing. We want to promote the work that you're doing, sir. One of the things that that Anthony, we affectionately call him Coop around these parts. His state is that you were affiliated with the Black Panthers. And so for a lot of our listeners, Black Like Me is in season 4. We have people who have downloaded our episodes from almost 100 countries, like 98 countries around the world. So people are listening in to understand a very real and candid discussion that Black folks have about our history, our world, because they feel that this isn't propaganda. We're just brothers and sisters chopping it up, mixing it up and talking about life. But many people have been told that Black Panthers were a terrorist group, that they just went around, shooting police and attacking white communities. But that's not what drew you to the Black Panthers. And so I may ask you what age you were when you became affiliated with the Black Panthers, and what drew you to being connected with them?
So the year was 1968. That's when the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party was established at 2350 West Madison. On the west side of Chicago. I had heard about the Black Panther Party a year or so prior. The party was started in October of 1966 in Oakland, California. Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale started the Black Panther Party. One of the things that got them national attention and acclaim and a lot of hate was in, I think it was 1967, when they went to Sacramento to protest the end, a law that had allowed them to observe the police while they were armed, as long as you could carry a weapon as long as it was not hidden.
Sure.
And they would patrol the police, and they were openly carrying weapons, and they carried a law book.
Yes,
because they knew the law.
It was their right.
And so that was when that got national attention and national acclaim. The party came to Chicago in November of 1968, as I mentioned, at 2315 West Madison. Fred Hampton was the deputy chairman of the Illinois chapter, the Black Panther Party, a dynamic speaker, a dynamic organizer, and a dynamic leader, motivator, an amazing young man. Mm-hmm. Fred Hampton was 21 years old when he was assassinated by the Chicago police under the direction of the FBI.
21.
21 years old. And the thing about it was that J. Edgar Hoover, who had been the head of the FBI,
yes,
he said that the Black Panther Party was the number one threat, but it wasn't anything to do with the guns. The thing that he said that was most dangerous about the Black Panther Party was our Breakfast for Children program.
Yes.
In 1960s, the Black Panther Party was providing breakfast and eventually clothing and medical care for the Black community when the government wasn't.
Right.
And here's the other thing that was dangerous about the Black Panther Party. Now, often when I'm doing a presentation, especially for Black History Month, I'll ask people if they've heard of the Rainbow Coalition. And sometimes somebody will say, yeah.
Sure.
And I say, well, who started it? They'll say Jesse Jackson. It was started by the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party.
Wait, I didn't know that. The Rainbow
Coalition, the
wow.
initial participants in the Rainbow Coalition was the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, the Young Lords, which had been a Puerto Rican street gang, which had become political over on the north side, near north side of the city, and the Young Patriots. The Young Patriots, poor Appalachian whites, all right, hillbillies. They had black berets with little Confederate flags on them.
What?
There is a documentary called American Revolution 2. You can find it on YouTube, it's free. It's called American Revolution 2. When you watch this documentary, you will see this meeting where our field secretary, Bob Lee, under Fred's direction, had gone to Uptown to speak to the Young Patriots, which we should be working together. And you see Bob Lee say, the police are beating your butts, they're beating our butts. You got substandard housing and so do we. Your grocery stores are selling poor and substandard foods. And so we should be working together. And at the end of the meeting, you'll see this interview where the director, Michael, I can't remember his last name, he talks to one of the older patriots and says, well, what do you think about what these Panthers are talking? Now, I'm going to paraphrase his response. I'm a storyteller, I take those liberties.
Sure.
If them Black Panthers are going to support us, we should support them Black Panthers. Now, here's something that's not in the documentary.
Sure.
A week later, after that scene, Bob Lee was in the area of Uptown by himself. He was usually there with Hank, who was his bodyguard. But this day he was alone. Chicago police saw him by himself, swooped down on him, arrested him, handcuffed him, put him in the back of a car to do who knows what. Some of the Young Patriots saw what was happening and they put the word out. Those poor Appalachian whites came out en masse, surrounded that police car, and forced that officer to let Bob Lee go.
They saved his life.
Yes. Poor whites, Black folks working together.
That's our history that we don't talk about.
Yes. Yes. There's so much. There's so much.
Hey, this is Eli Steenlich, the engineer and editor of the Black Like Me podcast, and I just wanted to take a moment to tell you about Patreon, our service that lets you support the show, and we know that you all love the show and listen every week, and so if you want to keep supporting what we do, make sure you go to patreon.com/blacklikeme. It's never been easier to give to the show and support it. We have a new $2 level, which is cheaper than a cup of coffee. So go ahead and go over to the website, patreon.com/blacklikeme, and make sure you keep the content coming. And we've already started to do some new things that we're excited about because of the Patreon supporters that we have. So we're going to take you back to the show and back to Dr. G. But thanks for listening.
So what part of their work in particular, Mr. McCarty, caught your attention? Was it the brazen boldness of Black men with weapons? Was it the after-school programming? What really spoke to you as a Black young man in Chicago within the Black Panther movement that made you say, this is it? Like, you're born in 1950, so they come in at 67, 68. You're 17, 18. You're coming of age. What made you say, I got to get me some of this?
Here you had these men and women saying, enough. All right, enough. If you are going to try to destroy us, we are going to defend ourselves. Yes. We are going to stand up against this. And then to reach out. One of the things that was powerful about the Black Panther Party was its ability to adapt. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it started off as the Black Panther Party for self-defense with this concept of defending the police. And then it went into this concept of revolution. But then there was the understanding that, not everybody's ready for that. People have needs. They're trying to just, feed their children, right. Get them to school, get health care, have good clothing. And so the Black Panther Party started saying, what are the needs of the community? And how can we provide them? Mm-hmm. One of my storytelling friends out here, Baba the storyteller, he tells a story of how when he was a kid, what he knew about the Black Panther Party was getting shoes. There was a place where people could go and get new shoes free of charge.
Through the Panthers.
Through the Black Panther, through the Black Panther. There were there were programs that I didn't even know about, because around the country and around the world, different chapters did different things. There were medical clinics. There was an ambulance service, I think, up in the Seattle area. There were all these different, one of the things that happened in Illinois, so you have so many people who had relatives in prisons and jails. Right. And these prisons and jails are in these out-of-way places. The Black Panther Party provided buses on a weekly basis that would take people to go visit their friends and relatives.
That's amazing.
There was so many, and that was it. It would say, okay, what needs to be done? What does the community need? How can we fulfill that need? And how can we help the community learn how to take care of themselves?
So how long were you involved, sir?
I joined the party when it opened in '68, and then somewhere in probably around spring, summer of '70, my first wife and I left. After Fred was assassinated, there was a lot of things going on. Later, we were to find out that William O'Neill, our head of security, was the FBI plant. He had been the person who gave the FBI. Okay, here's something that you don't know. So a lot of people know that William O'Neill, our head of security, was the FBI plant. Right. He gave the Chicago police and the FBI a layout of the apartment so they could be sure to get Fred when they came. But here's what you don't know. It's two things that you probably don't know. Mm-hmm. At the end of the raid, which happened December 4th, 1969, the raid happened about 4-something in the morning. At the end of the raid, Fred was still alive. He had never regained consciousness, and I'll explain why that happened in a minute. But at the end of the raid, he was still alive. One of the Panthers who was in the dining room at the time, handcuffed, heard an officer say, he's still alive, and then bam, bam, 2 bullets, and the officer said, he's good and dead now. But here's the deal. Mm-hmm. Even had they not put those 2 bullets in Fred's head, he would have died anyway. Because the night before the raid, William O'Neill, the FBI plant, and our head of security had given Fred 6 times the lethal dose of Seconal. So even had they not put those bullets in his head, he would have died anyway.
Because he was poisoned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Once a month, a group of former Black Panthers, we get together at Simply Wholesome, a restaurant over in the LA area. And Black Lives Matters, former Black Panthers, Brown Berets, students, people come to study with each other, to listen to each other, to find out what's going on. So the struggle continues. The struggle continues. I mean, there are people, I met this young lady, these young ladies, they were like college age, and this was some years ago, and they were going into the community. They were talking to kids about the importance of learning about their history, of standing up. So it continues, it grows, it's always going. It's just a matter of finding and connecting. That's it. It's just a matter of finding and connecting. Now, fortunately, that's one of the advantages of having social media now, that you can find people out there. On my Facebook page especially, I'm connected with people all over the world who are involved in the struggle. There, a couple of years ago, we had the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Black Panther Party up in Oakland. There was a group of Polynesian Panthers from New Zealand. Polynesian Panthers from New Zealand. There were groups of people all over the world, South America, in Europe, New Zealand, Australia, Aborigines, people who were inspired by the Black Panther Party decades ago. They were inspired by the Black Panther Party, and they have organizations all over the world where people are working to stand up and to help those who need to stand up or are afraid to stand up.
Wow. I read an article last week. I believe the author's name was Evelyn Chin. It was written in 2001, but she talked about the things that Asian Americans learned from the civil rights leaders, from Black Panther leaders that helped really create the civil rights movement for Asian Americans. And I think while we're talking about dropped or lost history, if some of these groups understood the role that Black people have had in securing their rights, we could establish greater solidarity, because I think many of them have aligned with white leadership in thinking we're lazy and don't pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And they don't even understand that legislation, even that concerning international law of even how Asian Americans come into the United States in the 1960s because of civil rights laws and actions. I think if more groups understood that they got their history through the struggle of Black folks, it might instigate greater collaboration, or at least appreciation for Black folks and what we've done for everybody in this country.
At the 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party, there was a panel on the Rainbow Coalition. It was an amazing session. So I mentioned the Young Lords, I mentioned the Young Patriots. There was also the Red Guard. These were Chinese American activists.
Wow.
I can't remember the name of the Japanese group. There were folks from Palestine. There were all of these people. All of these, that panel was amazing. The whole stage was full of representatives from all these different cultures who had been inspired by the Black Panther Party.
Was that recorded? Can we find that on the internet?
Good question. I'd hope so, but I don't know.
We'll research that, because if it is, we will link it or some write-up about that, because that's amazing.
There's stuff on YouTube. There's definitely a lot of stuff that you Google.
Just Google. Got you. I remember seeing a picture that really inspired me. It was looked like it was a Japanese American gentleman. He had a beret on, he had a clenched fist, and he had a sign that said "Yellow Peril stands with Black Power."
Yeah.
So what you're talking about, that coalition that was at the 50th anniversary, that's real. You had Asian American folks who stood with Black folks.
Yep.
And now that Asian Americans are experiencing a new surge of hatred against them, we've got to go back to that history, because just as they stood with us, it's important for us to stand with them. But I'm talking with my key friends, my close friends in that community, that have said many Asian Americans in this country who have been successful do not identify with the Black struggle because they've been called the model minority and have been fed a bill of goods from the white power structure, not interact with us. I think we're going to begin to see a resurgence of those groups working together again, because when we connect, we can do great things, because people of color are not the minority in the world. The fact that we're called minorities is crazy, because white folks in the world are the minority.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed.
Wow. So then you served in the armed services, sir. So you went into the military?
Yes, I was in the Army.
So now that's interesting. Not many Black Panthers matriculated from that type of organization into the U.S. Army. So either you didn't have it, didn't overcame any suspicions or disdain for the U.S. government. How did you make that transition from a community person? You were involved in the NAACP as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
You were connected with the Black Panther when it was in its infancy. Then you put on, a uniform. Man, you're starting to sound like a Black version of Forrest Gump.
Well, let me tell you what happened, because here's the deal. So, as I mentioned, my first wife and I, we left the Black Panther Party in 1970. I was working at the post office, and around December of 70, I'm at my job. My supervisor comes to me and says, "Mac, there's these government people. It was the FBI. You have to go to the 9th floor." And if this was a movie, when he said the 9th floor, the music would have gone dun 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 dun, because nothing good happened on the 9th floor.
No, that sounds ominous.
These 2 FBI agents were there. They wanted me to rejoin the party and be an informer.
What?
So I told them what they could do with that idea. And this is what they said to me. "We can make your life very difficult. Either you will work for us or you won't work." You ever see that Will Smith movie,
Enemy of the State?
Enemy of the State.
Yes, I
They did an Enemy of the State on my butt. They proceeded to destroy my life. I had to leave the post office because they were going to prosecute me. They sent me documents, conversations I had in bookstores about revolution, how many guns I own, how many rounds of ammunition I bought. Later, my first wife and I would independently get our FBI files. They had when we had arguments, when we made love. They were all up in our.
Wait. You about to scare me, Mr. McCarty. They had that documented.
They had all this stuff. And so I had to leave. I had to leave the post office. I would go and apply for other jobs, and my applications would mysteriously disappear. Or the job for which they said I was perfect, all of a sudden I wasn't so perfect. Over the next 2 years, I had 3 different apartments broken into 8 times. All right. There was just this bam, bam, bam. So here it is. It's the day before Thanksgiving, 1972. I had to drop out of school. I'd been going to the University of Illinois. I had to drop out because I was a nervous wreck because of all this stuff there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. I didn't have to do a whole few hours on that. I came home from driving a cab to my apartment over in South Shore, and as I'm walking down the hallway, I see that my apartment door is open. Break-in number 8. Anything that I had of value was gone. I've got the FBI, the US government, putting major foot to my butt. What am I going to do? How am I going to deal with this? And I had this thought. I'm going to join the Army. I'm going to play soldier, and I'm going to get these people off my butt. And that's what I did. So I'm in the Army. I was stationed at Fort Polk, Louisiana for both basic training and advanced individual training. Mm-hmm. I graduated from basic training, and my AIT unit was down the road. One day I'm walking past the basic unit, and one of the permanent duty guys sees me. He says, Matt, these FBI people, they've been around here. They've been asking all these questions about you. I said, okay, I'm expecting this. The next day at my AI2 unit.
I'm sorry, what's AI2? What's AI?
Advanced individual training.
Okay,
That's where you get your job.
Sure.
Training. So my first sergeant says, Mac, these FBI people, they say you were in the Black Panther Party, want to talk to you. And I went and I told them a story. And I got them off my back.
Grio, you told them a story.
I told them a story. Oh, yeah.
What'd you say? The year was 1968.
Well, what I said was, I have seen the error of my ways, and I'm here to serve my country. They had been watching me. I knew this. I knew they would be watching me. And when they interviewed people about me, They said, "Oh, McCarty, he's officer material," and I got them off my back. Desperate times, desperate measures.
Now, I believe you completely, but for folks who are listening, this is not Will Smith. This is not Enemy of the State. Truth is stranger than fiction. This
Sure
stuff happens. This is not Martin Luther King Jr. that I'm talking to, folks. This is not Malcolm X. This man had the federal government in his bedroom, listening to arguments and having documentation and saying that they're going to make his life hellacious. Is Dr. Mr. McCarty, is this why after the 1960s you see such a shift in what had been the civil rights movement? Some people say that it went from being the civil rights movement to the civil rights industry. Was it that level of intense scrutiny and threats by the government that completely what's it called, neutered or castrated our Black male leaders? Because that had to have been widespread, and not just you.
Right, exactly. What happened to me happened to many people in many organizations who stood up, who fought against. What happened was that it was also the divide and conquer thing that happened. Sure. The idea that, okay, for instance, in the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, one of the efforts of Fred Hampton and the party were to get the street gangs, vice lords, the Blackstone Rangers, and what have you, to become political. Okay, so one of the most famous situations was a meeting between the Black Panther Party and the Blackstone Rangers. And what the FBI had done through their plants in both organizations, they had they sent letters. There was a letter sent to the leadership of the Black Panther Party. There were letters sent to the leadership of the Black Keystone Nation. There were phone calls made saying, listen, they're trying to set you up. They're trying to do this to keep people at each other, divide and conquer.
Sure.
All right. So there was so much, it was a major effort. It was an absolute major effort that went on. So you had to get past that, but it was hard to get past it at the time. Okay, now in hindsight, we can look back and see what's going on. But at the time, they're playing off against each other. They're playing all these different organizations off against each other. Right. And they've got these people inside these organizations to feed that concept of division.
Sure. So that they can then say these folks can't get along. They're all power hungry. These Black folks they cannot get along.
I don't know if you recall, I can't remember the man's name, but it's only in the last couple of decades it was found out that there was this man who was a major photographer during the civil rights era who was the FBI plant.
I heard about that.
Yeah, he was he had all these great photos of Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement, what have you, and he was feeding the FBI information and doing his part to cause division.
Now, Mr. McCarty, Black folks believe this because we have too many uncles and grandfathers and folks like you who are credible to say these things. But many of our listeners are white, and all they have to do is begin to Google these things is what you said, and to get this information, because what has made race relations very difficult is that these folks are trying to become woke. The folks who are listening are really trying to lean in to understand what they've missed. And that's why this quote from James Baldwin, I just used it in a recent interview. I can't find it now. I don't want to fish around for it. But basically, he's telling white folks, to the extent that you don't understand the history of Black folks, you don't understand yourselves or your own history. And so, Mr. McCarty, many of our listeners are white who are trying to navigate truth, because they've been told so many negative things about Black folks, and they have such a whitewashed view of history that is almost unconscionable for them to imagine that the U.S. government would do the kinds of things that you're saying that has happened. And so they can Google this information. They can watch documentaries. Are there a couple, and we'll put links of these things that you share with us in this podcast. But are there any documentaries or series that you would just recommend off the top of your head for folks who are hungry for history and just need to have their minds bathed in the fact that this is possible and that this really did happen?
The Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution, is a documentary that I highly recommend. There is a documentary about my experience, about my life, called Belonging in the USA, the story of Michael McCarty. And that can be found on the Belonging in the USA website or the Belonging in the USA Facebook page. And just like I said, YouTube that I mentioned earlier, there's so much out there. There's so many books. Yeah, there's so many books. There are so many things that are going on. It's just a matter of taking the time to ask the questions and to search for the answers, and to step out and find people, find books, find organizations. There's Coming to the Table is an organization I discovered here recently. This started out during slavery times. You had the white families, you had the black slaves, and then you had the interaction that happened between them. So as I recall, there was a century later, there's this white family that's having a reunion, and there's this black family that's having a reunion, and eventually they find out they're cousins.
I got that going on in my family.
Yeah, and so this movement called Coming to the Table developed, where people from those sides are interested in finding out about the other side. Not every, because there was this, as I recall, there's a book about it. I can't remember the title of the book, but if you look up Coming to the Table, you'll find it.
Sure.
There was this white family that found out that their family had been slave owners. They didn't know that.
That's
and then
my
they
family.
found out there was this black family who had been descendants of those slaves. And some of those people started coming together. Now, didn't everybody want to come together?
I know that's right.
Didn't everybody want to come together?
But enough do. But there are those who do. And
Yes,
I'm meeting white relatives who want to come together and talk. That's powerful.
Yes.
That's powerful.
Knowledge is power.
It is. Mr. McCarty, I hear people talk about schools not teaching Black history, but at some point this becomes the responsibility of parents. I mean, we have to tell the truth. White folks don't sit around the dinner table talking about Napoleon. It's not like they just sat around talking about their history either. Some of this was taught in academic circles. But with the internet, with documentaries, we have YouTube and Netflix. There's really no excuse. And so what's your message to parents who bemoan the fact that their children are not learning enough Black history in school? And I know what you're going to say, but I just I want your voice. What's your message to parents who are waiting for white people to teach our kids Black history?
Stop waiting. Get to going. Get to the book. Here's something. I have a personal mission.
Yes.
Okay.
I bet you do.
I work in schools, I work in libraries, I work in prisons. Okay. I work with at-risk youth. When I became a storyteller in the 90s, working with at-risk youth became a specialty of mine. One of the things that I observed in working in continuation schools, many, if not most of the children, mostly boys, didn't know how to read, or didn't read well. All right.
True.
And they acted out to disguise this.
Yes.
So give kids books. All right.
Yes.
Give kids books. Not only your kids, fine. Yes, definitely give your own kids books. But I keep books in my car. All right. I keep books in my car. One day I was in Pasadena. I was coming out of Whole Foods, and I saw this young Black teenage boy standing out in front of the Whole Foods. I said, "Yo, young brother, what do you like to read?" He said, "I don't like to read." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "You like rap?" He said, "Yeah, I like rap." I said, "I got a book on Tupac. I got a book on 50 Cent." All right, and I gave him the book. All right. I was doing a program. A former Panther had a continuation school over in the Black section of LA, and I'd given a program there, and I'd given away a bunch of books. Well, some of the boys, especially, I don't want no book. I got some Marvel comic books. Okay. Whatever will get them to read. Whatever,
get it in their hands.
Meet them where they are.
Yes.
Whatever will get them to read. But check this out. So it's Black and Latino boys and girls.
Yes.
My session is over. Most of the kids are in another part of the room. There's this one Latino teenage boy sitting in the back of the room by himself. I've got these two books left. It's a physics book and workbook. And I'm just holding it, and I see him sort of looking at the books. And the kids, they're not paying attention to what's going on. And I say to nobody in particular, anybody interested in reading about physics? And he looks at me, he looks to see that the kids, his classmates aren't paying attention. He said, so I slipped in the books.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, but let me tell you this one. This is great. This is amazing.
Yes.
In my parking space here where we live, I have hundreds and hundreds of books that I give away. I stack them. I got 2 7-foot cases. I got bookcases. I got table stacked with boxes and boxes of books. One of my neighbor, her oldest son was there with his girlfriend and her daughter, who was about 11 or 12, and a boy cousin who was about 10 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, hey, come on over here. Have some books. That's it. Just, have some books.
Right.
And you see some books. So they got some books. It was a couple of years later, 1.5 years, 2 years later, I see the son. I said, so what happened to the young boy? I'd seen the girl, but I hadn't seen the boy in a while.
Right.
He said, man, I've been meaning to tell you, before you gave him those books, he got poor grades in school. He didn't read. After he got those books from you, he became a reader. He gets A's and B's. He started writing. He started creating his own comic books. He draws the illustrations and creates his own comic books.
So the books just unleashed all of that in him.
Yes. Give a child a book. And the thing here's what's important, all right, to my mind. Like I said, you meet people where they are. All right. You want them to read something, that's all well and good. What do they want to read? And whatever they want to read, that's where you start. It doesn't matter if it's what you want them to read. They got to start reading. There's a book called The Teacher Who Couldn't Read. This is an amazing story. This is a white guy. I met him back in the 90s. This guy went through middle school, high school, college, and couldn't read. Became a teacher, got awards for his innovative teaching techniques because he did all these exercises, having students read things that had to be read to the classroom, write things on the board because he couldn't do those things.
Wait, okay? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and
this is true.
Yeah, he taught for like years, right? I think maybe 18 years he taught, couldn't read. He got busted by his 3-year-old daughter. The mother would read a book and he would read a book. Now, when he read the book of this children's book, he would make up a story based on the pictures. One day, the daughter asked him to read a book that the mother usually read. So as he started trying to make up the story, the daughter would say, no, daddy, that's not right. No, daddy, that's not the story. And his wife saw this. And he had told her he couldn't read, but she thought he just didn't like to read. And that was the thing that motivated him to learn to read. And he was in his 40s.
The teacher who couldn't read?
The teacher who couldn't read.
No, we're going to have to utilize that. Listen, Mr. McCarty, let me ask you this, man. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time. I'm loving talking with you. After this interview, I would love to reach out to you because I have ideas of where I would want to create online platforms because I have this multicultural network of folks. I'd love for them just to listen to you as a Black griot talk about navigating the Army, the FBI, Black Panthers movement. There are folks in my generation and younger who need to benefit from you. And maybe if we weren't sequestered in our homes and maybe if we didn't have the internet, we wouldn't know how to access you. But I'm thinking of just even networks of Black folks who I would love just to come and sit at your feet. And so just know, I want to find a way to keep in touch with you because we don't have access to enough people who know what you know, live what you live, done what you've done, because that inspires me. Yeah, in my work. And so I hope that we can stay in touch and find formats through Zoom platforms like this to bring people in to really learn about you and your work and your story and your perception, sir.
I love it. And I love, there's so much that we can do. Part of the problem is that we think that we don't have power. We think, and we do.
Yes,
we do. I mean, like I said, the simple act of giving a person a book. Now, I didn't say a child.
You said a person.
I said a person. All right. 'Cause I give books to everybody. Right now, as I mentioned, I work in the Arts and Corrections program in California prisons. I got 2 boxes of books I'm about to send off to one of the prisons because, you know, the inmates are locked down. Of course, they locked in, but they really locked in now with the coronavirus. All right. Send someone books.
That's
Adults,
a great point.
Children. It's a simple thing. It's a very, very simple thing. Look for something on a daily, weekly basis. Try to find out something about somebody, family, history, culture that you don't know.
That's great.
Google. Just check out stuff. Just check out stuff.
We have access. Take advantage of it.
Yes.
You know, Mr. McCarty, it's interesting. It's widely known in this community that your nephew Anthony spent some time in prison. And he talked to me about an uncle who sent him books about how to start a business, how to write a business plans. He now works for me full time. He's one of my vice presidents.
Yeah.
But his job title is Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and Reentry. He sits in on meetings with me to try to figure out how do we establish business entities within our work? How do we create revenue generating models of our work to fund what we're doing? He helped me to take a look at a house that the Department of Corrections was subsidizing. Basically, they were paying to have some of the people being released stay in rooms there. He pulled me to the side, told me how he thought we could rearrange the house to renegotiate a larger deal with the Department of Corrections. I said, all right, make sure this is a holy hustle because I'm not going to prison because I don't have a prison ministry. He restructured that deal.
Yeah.
He renegotiated it with the State Department of Corrections. And because of the cash flow on that deal that he structured, I was able to hire him full time.
Yeah.
He created that revenue, but he learned to do those kinds of things, sir, because you gave him books when he was in prison. So I want you to know I and the city of Madison and men coming out of prison are benefiting from the fact that you sent that man books in prison. I appreciate that, sir.
Yes. Yeah. And I tell his story in the work I do in the prisons.
Wow.
I tell his story because here, again, life is yin and yang. It's good and bad. It's ups and downs. It's sideways. All these things, they happen in life. The issue is, how do we deal with the things that confront us? Do we let them crush us, suppress us, or do we use them as stepping stones to go forward? And that's exactly what Anthony did. That's just exactly what Anthony did.
And he's passing that forward. Forward. Hey, sir, last couple things. Growing up, who are some of your favorite authors or poets? I guess those are authors also. Just curious about the writers who inspired you.
Don L. Lee. Now he's known as Mahabuti. I got the, but sure. Don L. Lee, Leroy Jones, who became Amira Baraka, the last poets,
yes, that
were out of New York, yes. And of course the classics when you discover Langston Hughes, sure, and Nikki Giovanni, wow, Maya Angelou. Those are the folks you love to read. Right? Wow. Yeah. Wow. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll tell you this real quick. Yes. Nikki Giovanni, who was my wife's favorite poet, she did a presentation out here years ago, and she told a story how when Emmett Smith had been brutally murdered, the powers that be were trying to suppress this. Well, the who were the guys? The guys who worked on the train, the Pullman Porters. The Pullman Porters. The Pullman Porters helped to smuggle his body out of the South so it could be seen, because the mother wanted the world to see this. So they did that? Yes. Yes. And people don't know about that. People don't know about that. There's so much. I have been studying Black history since 1966, actively studying Black history. And pretty much every day I learn something new. I love that. I learned something new.
I love that. I hope you're posting about that because we need to
I'm
read
on
what you're
Facebook.
reading. Okay, I'm gonna start following you on Facebook. Sir, your 15-second spiel or soapbox speech about what it's going to take to bring a greater sense of honor and respect back to the Black community, or a word of encouragement to the Black community about what it's got to do to really regain.
Love yourself. Love our people.
That's your message. Love
our history and our culture, and spread the word.
Dang, I'm going to end on that note because that was powerful. Listen, you all, this has been a particularly special episode of Black Like Me. For me, my guest has been Mr. Michael McCarty, a latter-day griot, and he has broken it down for us. I am planning to put several links in this episode notes section so that you can follow the things that he's reading. Go to his Facebook page. Because these are the folks that have helped to make this country great. Not just Black America great, but this country great. Listen, you all know people who need to hear this episode. And so Black Like Me listeners, I need you to do more than just listen to this yourselves. I need you to repost it, share it with someone who's a historian or who's been wanting to know more about Black history, who've been wanting to lean in closer, do it. So as always, folks, I need you to subscribe. I need you to lean in. I need you to listen deeply. I need you to allow your thinking to be changed and your hearts to be transformed because I need you to be a part of the change that we are seeking. Click the Patreon link because we would love to shout your name out for those who are our partners and give at least $6 a month. We'd love to give you a special shout out because we want to continue to bring you this great programming on a weekly basis and just giving you great insights into what it means to be Black and to pursue excellence in America. So again, Mr. McCarty, I appreciate you, sir. I honor what you've done and the fact that you continue to pay it forward and to share it with folks like myself. This has been a bright spot in this COVID-19 season and in doing these recordings and these episodes from my home. You have been a real bright spot. I appreciate you, sir, and I guarantee you this will not be our last conversation.
Sounds cool and the gang to me.
Come on. All right. I love that.
All right,
come on. So listen, Black Like Me family, make this world a better place. Be safe. Take care of yourself. Think about others and share this podcast episode. Take care.
Right on.
Ooh, Black Like Me.
I want to thank Corey Saffolk for creating the music for this podcast, my podcast manager, Tyler Nyland, engineer and editor, Eli Steenlich, my editor, Jeremy Holliday, and a special thank you to WORT Studios, where we record Black Like Me.
Ooh, Black Like Me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at www.alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.